Good evening. Welcome to Haunt Your House, presented by Briggs Freeze Productions. Streaming scary stories straight to your screen. I'm Megan.
And I'm Andrew. We are bringing you 3 different nights of spooktacular fun, and each night offers a little something different. Tonight is night 1 and will include creepy short stories, spooky songs, and haunted poems.
Tonight's entertainment features performers of all kinds, and if you'd like to support us, you can find Venmo information on your screen and in the description box of this video. Thank you for supporting our show. Now it's time to get haunted.
When shall we 3 meet again? In thunder, lightning, or in rain?
When the hurly-burly's done, when the battle's lost and won.
That will be ere the set of sun.
Where the place?
Upon the heath,
There to meet with Macbeth.
I come, Grey Malkin.
Paddock calls.
Anon.
Fair is foul, and foul is fair. Hover through the fog and fill the air. Where hast thou been, sister?
Killing swine. Sister, where thou?
A sailor's wife had chestnuts in her lap, and munched and munched and munched. Give me, quoth I, aroint thee, witch, the rum-fed Runyon cries. Her husband's to Aleppo gone, master of the tiger. But in a sieve I'll thither sail, and like a rat without a tail, I'll do. I'll
I'll give thee a wind.
Thou art kind.
And I another. I myself have all the other. And the very ports they blow, all the quarters that they know. In the shipman's card I will drain him dry as hay. Sleep shall neither night nor day hang upon his penthouse lid. He shall live a man forbid. Where he send nights 9 times 9 shall he dwindle, peak and pine. Though he bark cannot be lost, yet it shall be tempest tossed. Look what I have.
Show me. Show me!
Here I have a pilot's thumb, wrecked as homeward he did come.
A drum, Macbeth doth come.
The weird sisters, hand in hand, hosters of the sea and land, thus do go about, thrice to thine and thrice to mine, and thrice again to make up 9. Peace! The charm's wound up. All hail Macbeth. Hail to thee, Thane of Glamis.
All hail Macbeth. Hail to thee, Thane of Cawdor.
All hail Macbeth, thou shalt be king hereafter.
Hail.
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 Lesser than Macbeth, and greater.
Not so happy, yet much happier.
Thou shalt get kings, thou shalt be none, so all hail Macbeth and Banquo.
Banquo and Macbeth, all hail. Thrice the brined cat hath mewed.
Thrice and once the hedge pig whined.
Harpier cries, 'tis time, 'tis time.
Round about the cauldron go, in the poison entrails throw. Toad, that under cold stone days and night hath 31, sweltered venom sleeping got, boil thou first in the charmed pot.
Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble.
Fillet the finny snake in the cauldron, boil and bake. Eye of newt and toe of frog, wool of bat and tongue of dog, adder's fork and blindword's sting, lizard's leg and owlet's wing. For a charm of powerful trouble, like a hell broth, boil and bubble.
Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Scale of dragon, tooth of wolf, witch's mummy's maw and gulf, of the raven, salt sea shark, root of the hemlock, dig the dark, liver of blasphemous Jew, gall of goat and slips of yew, slivered in the moon's eclipse, nose of Turk and Tartar's lips, finger of birth strangled babe, ditch delivered by a drab, make the gruel thick and slab, Add thereto a tiger's children for the ingredients of our cauldron.
Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Cool it with a baboon's blood, then the charm is firm and good. By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. Open locks, whoever knocks.
Speak.
Demand.
We'll answer.
Say if thou'st rather hear it from our mouths or from our masters.
He knows thy thought. Hear his speech, but say thou not.
He will not be commanded. Here's another more potent than the first.
Show.
Show.
Show his eyes and grieve his heart. Come like shadows, so depart. Aye, sir, all this is so. But why stands Macbeth thus amazedly?
Come, sisters, cheer we up his spirits and show the best of our delights.
I'll charm the air to give a sound while you perform your antic round. That this great king may kindly say, our duties did his welcome pay.
I stopped going to church because God never answers me. But the devil speaks to me every night.
Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, and while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, "tapping at my chamber door. Only this and nothing more."
Distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow. Sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels named Lenore, nameless here forevermore.
And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terror I had never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. Some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is. Nothing more."
Presently my soul grew stronger. Hesitating then no longer, "Sir," said I, or "Madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more."
Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, Lenore. As I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word Lenore. Really this and nothing more.
Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping, somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what threat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more."
Open here I flung the shutter, when, with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but, with mine of lord or lady, perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more.
Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore.
Much I marvel this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such name as nevermore.
But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing farther than he uttered, feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, other friends have flown before, on the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. And the bird said, nevermore.
Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken. Doubtless, said I, what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore of nevermore.
But the raven, still beguiling all my fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then, upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore.
This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er, she shall press, nevermore.
Then, methought, the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee, respite and nepenthe from my memories of Lenore. Quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore.
Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil. Whether tempter sent, whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate yet undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore.
Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil. By that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore.
Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul has spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore.
And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming. And the lamplight over him, streaming, throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore.
Roses are red, violets are blue. You'd better run. I'm coming for you.
Every breath you take, and every move you make, every bond you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you every single day, and every word you say. Every game you play, every night you stay, I'll be watching you. Oh, can't you see that you belong to me? How my poor heart aches with every step you take, and every move you make, and every vow you break, every smile you fake, every claim you stake, I'll be watching you. Since you've been gone, I've been lost without a trace. I dream at night, I can only see your face. I look around, but it's you I can't replace. I feel so cold and I long for your embrace. I keep crying, baby, please. And can't you see you belong to me? How my poor heart aches with every breath you take, and every move you make, and every vow you break, every smile you fake, every claim you stake, I'll be watching you. Every move you make, every step you take, I'll be watching you.
Audra looked across the table to smile warmly at the loving faces of her husband and children. I do so enjoy our time together, she whispered as she gently placed each of their severed heads back in the refrigerator.
I was starving and lost in the woods until I found a hiker. I'm full now. Just wish he hadn't screamed so loud.
Hi, it's story time with Edward Gorey. We're going to read The Gashly Crumb Tinies. A is for Amy, who fell down the stairs. B is for Basil, assaulted by bears. C is for Clara, who wasted away. D is for Desmond, thrown out of a sleigh. E is for Ernest, who choked on a peach. F is for Fanny, sucked dry by a leech. G is for George, smothered under a rug. H is for Hector, done in by a thug. I is for Ida, who drowned in a lake. J is for James, who took lye by mistake. K is for Kate, who was struck with an axe. L is for Leo, who swallowed some tacks. M is for Maud, who was swept out to sea. Oh, I'll be right back.
N is for Neville, who died of ennui. O is for Olive, run through with an awl. P is for Prue, trampled flat in a brawl. Q is for Quentin, who sank in a mire. R is for Rhoda, consumed by fire. S is for Susan, who perished in a fire. T is for Titus, who flew into bits.
I will wait patiently until I'm found and exact my revenge. Flesh by the pound. Can you hear the beautiful ring of the bell? That means it's time to drag you down to hell.
The Red Death had long devastated the country. No pestilence had ever been so fatal or so hideous. Blood was its avatar and its seal, the redness and the horror of blood. There were sharp pains and sudden dizziness, and then profuse bleeding at the pores with dissolution. The scarlet stains upon the body, and especially upon the face of the victim, shut him out from the aid and from the sympathy of his fellow men. And the whole seizure, progress, and termination of the disease were incidents of but half an hour. But Prince Prospero was happy and dauntless and sagacious. When his dominions were half depopulated, he summoned to his presence 1,000 hale and light-hearted friends from among the knights and dames of his court, and with these he retired to the deep seclusion of one of his castellated abbeys. This was an extensive and magnificent structure, and the creation of the prince's own eccentric yet august taste. A strong and lofty wall girdled it in. The wall had gates of iron. The courtiers, having entered, brought furnaces and hammers and welded the bolts. They resolved to leave means neither of ingress or egress to the sudden impulses of despair or of frenzy from within. The abbey was amply provisioned. With such precautions, the courtiers might bid defiance to the contagion. The external world could take care of itself. In the meantime, it was folly to grieve or to think. The prince had provided all the appliances of pleasure. There were buffoons, there were improvisatori, there were ballet dancers, there were musicians, there was beauty, there was wine. All these and security were within. Without was the Red Death. It was toward the close of the 5th or 6th month of his seclusion, and while the pestilence raged most furiously abroad, that the Prince Prospero entertained his 1,000 friends at a masked ball of the most unusual magnificence. It was a voluptuous scene, that masquerade. But first, let me tell you of the rooms in which it was held. There were 7, an imperial suite. Now, in many palaces, however, such suites form a long and straight vista, while the folding doors slide back nearly to the walls on either hand, so the view of the whole extent is scarcely impeded. Here the case was very different, as might be expected from the Duke's love of the bizarre. The apartments were so irregularly disposed that the vision embraced but little more than one at a time. There was a sharp turn at every 20 or 30 yards, and at each turn a novel effect. To the right and left, in the middle of each wall, a tall and narrow Gothic window looked out upon a closed corridor. The windows were of stained glass, whose color varied in accordance to the prevailing hue of the decorations of the chamber into which it opened. That at the eastern extremity was hung, for example, in blue, and vividly blue were its windows. The second chamber was purple in its ornaments and tapestries, and here the panes were purple. The third was green throughout, and so were the casements. The fourth was furnished and lighted in orange. The fifth was white. The sixth was violet. The 7th apartment was closely shrouded in black velvet tapestries that hung all over the ceiling and down the walls, falling into heavy folds upon the carpet of the same material and hue. But in this chamber only, the color of the windows failed to correspond with the decorations. The panes there were scarlet, a deep blood color. Now, in no one of the 7 apartments was there any lamp or candelabrum. There was no light of any kind emanating from lamp or candle within the suite of chambers. But in the corridors that followed the suite there stood, opposite to each window, a heavy tripod bearing a brazier of fire that projected its rays through the tinted glass and so glaringly illuminated the room, and thus were produced a multitude of gaudy and fantastic appearances. But in the western or black chamber the effect of the firelight that streamed upon the dark hangings through the blood-tinted panes was ghastly in the extreme, and produced so wild a look upon the countenances of those who entered that there were few of the company bold enough to set foot within its precincts at all. It was in this apartment also that there stood against the western wall a gigantic clock of ebony. Its pendulum swung to and fro with a dull, heavy, monotonous clang, and when the minute hand made the circuit of the face and the hour was to be stricken, there came from its brazen lungs a sound which was clear and loud and deep and exceedingly musical, but so peculiar a note and emphasis that at each hour the musicians of the orchestra were constrained to pause momentarily in their performance to hearken the sound, and thus the waltzers ceased their evolutions, and there was a brief discontent of the whole gay company. And while the chimes of the clock rang, it was observed that the giddiest grew pale, and the more aged and sedate passed their hands over their brows as if confused reverie or meditation. But when the echoes had fully ceased, a light laughter at once pervaded the assembly, and the musicians looked at each other and smiled at their own nervousness and folly, and made whispering vows, each to the other, that the next chiming of the clock should produce in them no similar emotion. And then, after the lapse of 60 minutes, which embraced 3,600 seconds of time, there came yet another chiming of the clock, and there was the same discontent and tremulousness and meditation as before. But in spite of all these things, it was a gay and magnificent revel. The tastes of the Dukes were peculiar. He had a fine eye for color and effects. He disregarded mere fashion. His plans were bold and fiery, and his conceptions glowed with barbaric luster. There are some who had thought him mad. His followers felt that he was not. It was necessary to hear and see and touch him to be sure that he was not. The apartments were densely crowded, and in them beat feverishly the heart of life. and the revel went whirlingly on until at length there commenced the sounding of midnight upon the clock, and then the music ceased, as I have told, and the evolutions of the waltzers were quieted, and there was an uneasy pause of all things as before. But now there were 12 strokes to be sounded by the bell of the clock, and thus it happened, perhaps, that more of thought crept, with more of time, into the meditations of the thoughtful among those who revelled. And thus, too, it happened, perhaps, that before the last echoes of the last chime had utterly sunk into silence, there were many individuals in the crowd who had become aware of the presence of a masked figure which had arrested the attention of no single individual before. And the rumor of his new presence having spread itself whisperingly around, there arose at length from the whole company a buzz or murmur, expressive of disapproval and surprise, then finally of terror, of horror, and of disgust. In an assembly of phantasms such as I have painted, it may well be supposed that no ordinary appearance could have excited such sensation. In truth, the masquerade license of the night was nearly unlimited, but the figure in question had gone beyond the bounds of even the prince's indefinite decorum. Even with the utterly lost, to whom life and death are equally jest, there are matters of which no jest can be made. The whole company, indeed, seemed now deeply to feel that the costume and bearing of the stranger had neither wit nor propriety. The figure was tall and gaunt, and shrouded from head to foot in the habiliments of the grave. The mask which concealed the visage was made to resemble the countenance of a stiffened corpse. And yet all this might have been endured, if not approved, by the mad revellers around. But the mummer had gone so far as to assume the type of the Red Death. His vesture was dabbled in blood, and his broad brow, with all the features of his face, was besprinkled with scarlet horror. When the eyes of the Prince Prospero fell upon the spectral image, which, with a slow and solemn movement, as if to be more fully sustain its role, stalked to and fro among the waltzers, he seemed to be convulsed, in the first moment with a strong shudder either of terror or distaste, but in the next his brow reddened with rage. "Who dares," he demanded hoarsely of the courtiers who stood near him, "who dares to insult us with this blasphemous mockery? Seize him and unmask him, that we might know whom we might hang at sunrise from the battlements." It was in the eastern or blue chamber in which stood the Prince Prospero as he uttered these words. They rang throughout the 7 rooms loudly and clearly, for the prince was a bold and robust man, and the music had become hushed at the waving of his hand. It was in the blue room where stood the prince with a group of pale courtiers by his side. At first, as he spoke, there was a slight rushing movement of the group in the direction of the intruder, who at the moment was also near at hand, and now, with a deliberate and stately step, made closer approach to the speaker. But from a certain nameless awe with which the mad assumptions of the mummer had inspired the whole party, there were found none who put forth a hand to seize him, so that unimpeded he passed within a yard of the prince's person, and while the vast assembly, as if with one impulse, shrank from the centers of the room to the walls, and he made his way uninterruptedly, but with the same solemn and measured step, which had distinguished him from the first, through the blue chamber to the purple, through the purple to the green, from the green to the orange, and through this again to the white, and even thence to the violet, ere a decided movement had been made to arrest him. It was then, however, that the Prince Prospero, maddened with rage and the shame of his own momentary cowardice, rushed through the 6 chambers, with none followed him on account of deadly terror that had seized upon all. He bore aloft a drawn dagger, and had approached to within 3 or 4 feet of the retreating figure, when the latter, having attained the extremity of the velvet apartment, turned suddenly and confronted his pursuer. There was a sharp cry, and the dagger dropped gleamingly upon the sable carpet, upon which, instantly afterwards, fell prostrate in death the Prince Prospero. Then, with the wild courage of despair, a throng of the revelers at once threw themselves into the black apartment, and seizing the mummer, whose tall figure stood erect and motionless within the shadow of the ebony clock, gasped in horror at finding the costume and corpse-like mask which they had handled with so violent a rudeness uninhabited by any tangible form. And now was acknowledged the presence of the Red Death. He had come in like a thief in the night, and one by one dropped the revelers in the blood-bedewed halls of their revel, and each died in a despairing posture of his fall. And the life of the ebony clock went out with the last of the gay revelers, and darkness and decay and the Red Death held boundless dominion over all.
Scrubbing my hands non-stop for weeks. The blood just won't come off.
It's nice that my grandmother calls to check on me. But if she wants to communicate from the other side, I wish she wouldn't scream so much.
She only comes out at night, leading the hungry type. Nothing is new, I've seen her here before. Watching and waiting, oh, she's sitting with you, but her eyes are on the door. So many have paid to see what you think you're getting for free. Woman is wild, she can't tame by the purr of a jaguar. Money's the matter. If you're in it for love, you ain't gonna get too far. Oh, here she comes. Watch out, boy, she'll chew you up. Oh, here she comes. She's a man-eater. Oh, here she comes. Watch out, boy, she'll chew you up. Oh, here she comes. She's a man-eater. I wouldn't if I were you. I know what she can do. She's deadly, man. She could really rip your world apart. Mind over matter. Oh, the beauty is there, but the beast is in the heart. Oh, here she comes. Watch out, boy, she'll chew you up. Oh, here she comes. She's a man-eater. Oh, here she comes. Watch out, boy, she'll chew you up. Oh, here she comes. She's a man-eater. Oh! Come a little closer. I won't bite. Much. It's a beautiful night. Would you like to go for a walk under the moonlight? Oh, here she comes. She's a man-eater. Watch out, boy, she'll chew you up. Oh, here she comes. Watch out. She's a man-eater. Oh, here she comes. Here she comes. Watch out, boy, she'll chew you up. Oh, here she comes. She's a man-eater. The woman's wild. Nice of you to stop by. Would you like to stay for dinner? Oh, here she comes. Watch out, boy, she'll chew you up. Oh, she comes. She's a man-eater. Oh, here she comes. Watch out! Watch out, boy. Watch out, boy. Oh, here she comes. She's a man-eater.
Wrapped in sheets and cuddled in bed, you'll foolishly expose your head.
Twas Brillig and the Slithy Toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the Borogroves, and the Mome Raths outgrabe.
Beware the Jabberwock, my son! The jaws that bite, the claws that catch! Beware the Jub Bird! Shun the frumious Bandersnatch!
He took his vorpal sword in hand. Long time the manxome foe he sought. So rested he by the tum-tum tree, and stood a while in thought.
And as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead. And with its head he went galumphing back.
And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy! Oh, frabjous day! Callooh, Gallay! He chortled in his joy.
Twas Brillig and the Slothy Toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the Borogroves, and the Mome Raths outgrabe.
From the grave where my father was put, a hand reached up and grabbed my foot.
After dating all through high school and college, our daughter's boyfriend finally came by today to ask my wife and me for her hand. We gave it to him, hoping he'd finally tell us where the rest of her is.
My creation. Of my creation and creator I was absolutely ignorant, but I knew that I possessed no money, no friends, no kind of property. I was besides endued with a figure hideously deformed and loathsome. I was not even of the same nature as men. I was more agile than they, and could subsist upon coarser diet. I bore the extremes of heat and cold with less injury to my frame. My stature far exceeded theirs. When I looked around, I saw and heard none like me. Was I then a monster? A blot upon the earth from which all men fled and whom all men disowned? By degrees, I made a discovery of still greater moment. I found that these people possessed a method of communicating their experience and feelings to one another by articulate sounds. I perceived that the words they spoke sometimes produced pleasure, or pain, smiles, or sadness in the minds and countenances of the hearers. This was indeed a godlike science, and I ardently desired to become acquainted with it. I admired virtue and good feelings, and loved the gentle manners and amiable qualities of my cottagers, but I was shut out from intercourse with them, except through means which I obtained by stealth, when I was unseen and unknown, and which rather increased than satisfied the desire I had of becoming one among my fellows. I, the miserable and the abandoned, am an abortion, to be spurned at and kicked and trampled on. I am malicious because I am miserable. Am I not shunned and hated by all mankind?
The mirror had been left to me by my late aunt's estate, stored in the attic and covered in paper. I stared at my reflection, feeling that something was off, but not knowing what, when my reflection winked at me.
How do you do? I see you've met my faithful handyman. He's just a little brought down because when you knocked, he thought you were the candy man. Don't get strung out by the way I look. Don't judge a book by its cover. I'm not much of a man by the light of day, but by night I'm one hell of a lover. I'm just a sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania. Let me show you around, maybe play you a sound. You look like you're both pretty groovy. Or if you want something visual that's not too abysmal, we could take in an old Steve Reeves movie. Well, you got caught with a flat. Well, how about that? Well, babies, don't you panic. By the light of the night, it'll all seem all right. I'll get you a satanic mechanic. I'm just a sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania. Ha ha! Hit it! Here, I'm just a sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania. Ha ha! So, come up to the lab and see what's on the slab. I see you shiver with anticipation. But maybe the rain isn't really to blame, so I'll remove the cause. But not the symptom.